Welcome to Checks and Balances. I'm Michael Vincent. This is James Blair. And this week, getting some more cash flow from those investment properties.
So we're in a period at the moment, Mike, fair to say, where interest rates are rising. There's some uncertainty in the market. Yep. What will happen to property prices? People are just trying to hold on. They're trying to make sure that they're thinking long-term, not short-term.
Yep.
Mike, there's probably a few people we're talking to at the moment who are maybe thinking a little bit short-term.
Yep.
This podcast today is really all about what can you be doing, what's within your control to make sure with those things on the rise in a period of uncertainty, what can you do? So we've got five tips. Mike, kick us off with tip number one.
Yeah, cool. So tip number one is the obvious one. Do a rent review and see if you can increase it.
So this is very basic, but really, really important. And I would say something that a lot of landlords don't do for a variety of reasons. Sometimes we talk to people and they go, hey, Mike, want to buy an investment property. Little old Nana needs somewhere to live. I'm going to put her on the property.
Yeah, and actually it's quite common when people have family or their own family in a property that they don't charge a market rent. And hey, look, that's completely up to them. But what we're talking about here is if you have tenants and you're charging under the market rent, might be time to see what else is in similar properties in the surrounding area to your investment property, do a rent review and think about increasing it.
I hate it when family are living in investment properties because you don't want to raise Nana's rent, right?
No.
You don't want to put her through that. I think that there are lots of people in that situation where they haven't raised their rent for a while. Probably a good shout out for a property manager as well, where they can give you advice on what you might be able to do.
Yep. Oh, and do we have a really bad horror story about family living in a rental property, which involves a court case, $100,000 of legal fees, and ultimately no one talking to each other.
Doesn't sound like much fun at all.
No.
Okay, tip number 2. Consider reinvesting into the property. Maybe you can add another dwelling. Maybe there's the ability to add a room or something along those sort of lines to increase the rent. The appeal from a 2-bedroom place to a 3-bedroom place, maybe another room, something like that is really going to bump up the rent. There are some probably T's and C's that apply with this one.
Yeah.
The amount of people that do a renovation that goes over budget, never gets done, ends up in a divorce, not a lot of fun. You don't want to have to factor in divorce fees into renovation costs.
Yeah. One of the really sort of quick-ish ways or ways to control the budget on this is people add a tiny home on the back of their house.
Yep. So in times like now, increasing the rent is a really good. Reinvesting into the property, which will allow you to increase the rent, is a really good shout to get some quick wins.
Yeah. So tip 3. Now, generally speaking, with an investment property, if you have owner-occupied debt, we will advise you to have your investment property debt on interest only so you can focus on paying down your owner-occupied debt first. However, if you don't have the investment property debt on interest only, now might be the time to think about doing that. Absolutely, you will not be paying down principal on this. So you'll have to think about the exit strategy. Are you going to sell the house, pay it down later, something like that? However, when interest rates are rising or a little bit higher, and maybe you don't have the opportunity to increase that rental income in the near future, this can be a way to decrease the amount that you have to top up or sort of improve the cash flow from the overall picture from your investment property.
Especially if you have a mortgage on your own home, generally speaking, disclaimer down the bottom, this is not personalized advice. It is. But if you have, good luck with that, Mike. If you have a mortgage on your own home, it's probably something that would normally get recommended to you anyway to be interest only on the investment property so you can focus on paying off your personal debt. Mike, for somebody who hasn't gone through that process before, interest only, and then the banks are, they're a little bit moody at the moment, slightly more difficult to deal with. The mechanics of doing that, how complicated is it? Yeah,
so it's a full application. What the bank wants to know is that you can actually reasonably afford the debt after the interest-only period is ended. Let's say you have a 30-year loan that you take out. You put it on interest only for 5 years. It's the maximum interest only term at a first-tier bank for an investment property. They want to know that you can pay that back with a 25-year loan term after that interest-only period has expired. However, there are ways you can do that if you can't make that repayment. It's about pitching a good exit strategy to a bank. Speak to your broker because the bank is not going to give you an exit strategy.
Just imagine you working on your pitches being like, hello, ladies and gentlemen.
Exit strategies out the wazoo, mate.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today I'm representing John Smith. Now, listen, you might not want to do the interest-only period. However, okay, moving on to tip number 4. This is definitely one where it's all about surviving with higher interest rates. There's probably an argument, Mike, whether now is about surviving higher interest rates or whether we're just moving back to normal interest rates.
Yeah.
But regardless, if things are looking really tight for you, you're moving from a 2% interest rate to a 5% interest rate. You're going, how am I going to make sure I can survive through this situation? Restructuring to another bank and going back to a 30-year loan term might be a good option. Yep. The math of it is really basic, is if you had a 20-year period to pay off the mortgage, those repayments are going to be more aggressive. If you can restructure to a 30-year repayment period, you got more time to pay off the debt, so the repayments are going to be less.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, if it's already on interest only, this isn't going to make too much difference. But if you are paying principal and interest and you want to continue to pay principal and interest, then perhaps you kick that out to 30-year loan term just to reduce those repayments. If you're looking at moving banks during that process, it's going to be a bit of admin. But let's say you've had, hypothetical situation. Let's say you have got $1 million mortgage and it is on your investment property, and you want to extend the loan term out to 30 years, let's say you've had that mortgage for 5 years already, you may want to look at another bank because you might get $7,500 for shifting banks, cash contribution. Yeah, you're locked in for 3 years of that bank, but are you likely going to go anywhere in the next 3 years as interest rate rises? Probably not. So you have to go through a full application anyway. You could switch banks at the same time, get $7,500. Legal costs might be $2,500, $2,000 to shift. Ipso facto, you're up about $5,000.
Restructuring and kind of extending the length of your mortgage as a financial advisor does kind of hurt my soul a little bit. Makes me go, is this the right thing? Well, that was a little bit of Cookie Monster. But it kind of hurt me a little bit. But it does come back to the plan and the strategy. What is the exit strategy? What are you going to do with this mortgage and this property longer term? So it might be the right thing for you to do if there's cash flow restraints at the moment.
Absolutely. So tip number 5, if you have an in situ, what is classed as an in situ existing rental property, so you're perhaps getting phased out of the interest deductibility on the interest costs, you could look at renting your house out to kāinga ora or to social housing. Effectively, that way you will start to qualify for the interest deductibility on your interest payments, which could mean that you go from being cash flow negative to cash flow positive on the house.
Yeah. And the math on that is if you have say $1 million mortgage at a 4% interest rate, you're paying $40,000 of interest on that mortgage. Depending on your situation, your tax rate, you might be able to claim a third of that back. So from a cash flow perspective, it makes a really big difference. Now, obviously, the government is very keen to make more housing available. So there's certainly a process to make that available, but you have to meet certain criteria at the same time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just keep in mind there that kāinga ora generally will guarantee the condition of the house from when you started renting it out to when you cease that contract.
That's a really good shout, and probably a stereotype that a lot of people go, oh, I'm never going to put my house anywhere near social housing because they're just going to trash the place and smoke a bunch of meth in there.
Yeah.
Whatever happens, I mean, there's lots of good people in social housing that it's their long-term home. They're going to be staying there for a long time. If you do get a bad egg, though, the idea that you've got that kind of guarantee, it's a pretty good deal, right?
Absolutely. And if you sort of don't get that guarantee, James Blair, he's great with matches and an alibi. So he'll be able to sort you out.
Yeah. Not the first time, not the last time. But Mike, don't call me at 2 a.m. again, okay?
One day we should run through our exit strategies that people have pitched us, i.e. Have more children, buy a motel, syndicate it, rent it out, and then bump up the value. And we get a lot of different exit strategies.
Let's do one really quick because it's my favorite one. So one bloke, his based on his income, he couldn't borrow any more money. So he was like, Mike, I'm going to have some more kids. The kids are nearly 18, then we'll pump out a couple more. We're going to get them jobs, increase my serviceability, and then we'll be able to borrow more money.
He did.
Great. So there are our 5 tips right there. We're going to wrap it all up there. Before we do, linking this right back to, yes, interest rates are increasing. Yes, there's uncertainty in the market. Make sure you are not making short-term emotional decisions. Make sure you are linking it to your long-term financial plan.
Yep.
Thank you very much for joining us. Please make sure to subscribe, give us a review. We'll catch you next week.
Cheers.